Hiya, right. Today I'm speaking about gender in schools, and this is mainly came about because when I was in the schools and I noticed I'd done some research and it said there was a gender gap in schools. So I started sort of picking up on it and looking at the results that people were getting, and there is academically, boys are across the curriculum a lot further behind than girls. But this kind of got me questioning why this was. Is this a school problem, a gender problem? Like, what's causing it? So, and the reason it's important is because the research at the moment is making schools decide whether or not to teach children separately or together. And that's kind of the big thing that's going on at the moment. In America, there's absolutely tons of single-sex schools. Over here, it's not so common. We only normally get it in the private schools. There's a lot less sort of public schools that split them. So the big one in America, it's a mixed-sex school, but they decided for a year to separate everybody out. And this is because they thought that the boys, not the girls, but the boys needed a different structure. They said that the school wasn't set up for boys and that they needed more active lessons, more fun, more games, more breaks, less structure. It made me panic slightly when I read this. I was like, less structure. But they separated them out, and on self-report, everyone thought it was amazing. The teachers loved it, the girls really loved it. They thought it was the best thing ever not having the boys loved it, and then they got the results and found nothing. Absolutely no improvement with the girls, no improvement with the boys. It just felt nice to not have to deal with the other gender all the time. But it didn't help at all. So I then looked into whether or not the biological and cognitive differences that we all know, and everyone's aware of, were enough to actually account for this difference. Like all the research that shows that men's brains grow to be 10% larger, and men are better at spatial skills, women at verbal skills, and it's all so well documented that it's not even worth stating. Everybody knows these differences. But then when you take all these into account, and research has, they don't explain the difference. They don't go with it. So I think that we need to meet in the middle. The biological differences don't account for the differences shown between the learning of children. So I think we need to start looking at whether or not it's a social thing that we have imposed on the children, not just the children, on ourselves. So I started looking into whether or not there was a way that you can not equalise the genders, because these biological differences they're there, we know they're there, but whether or not we can limit the problems we get. So, go another one, I missed one, there we go. So I looked into social schema theory, and this accounts for all domains, but has specifically separated off and focused on gender as well as all and it explains how we have networks, and I always think of them as sort of boxes in our head. So you'll have done it if you've done categorization or anything like that. So everything we see perceptually, we then put into a box. Some things will go into multiple boxes, depending if they're related, and it allows us to see things and then generalize and work out what we know and what we don't know. Now the problem is with schemas is that they are completely based on the things that you have been exposed to, and only you, and the things you've been told, which means that some people have very narrow boxes and some people have very wide boxes, and it completely depends on your life. So they found that sort of children who have parents with stereotypical gender roles, where the dad sort of goes out to work or the mum stays at home, and they haven't experienced things very different to this. Maybe the friends they're with are particularly girly, and boys are boys. They have very narrow boxes, and this means that they actually, when things come into that middle bit, they actually miss them. Like they don't, because they're not used to seeing them, and they don't have information stored in their network on them, then they miss out on this. Whereas people that have wider boxes, where the female and the male boxes kind of overlap, they might even see things which go into both. Say they saw their mum hoovering one day and then the dad the next, then hoovering goes into both gender boxes. And this allowed children to be really open-minded. And this is what we need to be leaning towards, is widening people's schema boxes. Because when we're children and we find out that we are a certain gender, when you have that realisation that I'm a girl, you then attach your self-concept to the female gender box. And this narrows the box for the opposite gender. You focus in on all the information and all the perceptual stuff that you see on your gender, and stop noticing more of the stuff from the other gender in order to learn more about being a girl. And so you already start building your box up, and lacking knowledge about the other one. And the more you lack knowledge, the more you realise how different you are. And this begins to exaggerate the differences. So I'll go on to the next one. Unfortunately, our schemas are self-built, so they're not always right. In fact, most of the time, most of the stuff in our schemas is not wrong, it's just that you haven't found more information out yet, and these grow and we correct them as we find out more information. So schemas, they're quite obvious when you start looking at sort of like children and stuff, where gender is harder to tell. So it's quite obvious in this picture which one's sort of the boy and which one's the girl, because we have social. Chris, what do you think? Yeah. Right, so, and this is because we know from most of our lives that normally boys are in blue, girls are in pink, they have longer eyelashes, all the things that these photos kind of subtly, albeit I wasn't going to get bows and stuff, but it's you learn these things, they're in your boxes, that's why you know. But if you go on to the next slide, this becomes more difficult when you take out the social cues that we've put in our boxes. Chris, what do you think? They're both boys. But you have to think, you can, to be honest, if I said they were both girls, you'd believe me, right? You're completely relying on me to tell you what gender these children are. Because it's difficult, you're not born obviously looking one way or the other, it's actually us that impose this on us. And then we exaggerate these differences out of fear of people not knowing, or you not knowing, or them not knowing. God forbid a child might grow up and then you think, oh, they don't even know what they are, I don't know what they are. So we put these things on us out of sort of worriness of gender threat and things. So, go to the next one. So it's us that separate out. It's not them, it is us. And if we were allowing them more, they'd go more. Like in the classrooms, they've found that language is a big thing. So let alone the behaviour of the teacher, just the language they use. So when they come in the morning and they say, good morning, boys and girls, line up, boy, girl, right, boys go get your coats, now girls. It instantly starts making the children question why they're always being separated. And if you're already always being separated, even if it is by trivial things, you start questioning why that is. Well, you must be different because they're always separating us off. So children then naturally group because they've been grouped. So then even if they change teacher to a teacher that doesn't, you'll find they'll naturally do it anyway. Because we do it really young. Like even if you go into play groups, the mums with girls will sit and the mums with boys will sit and they'll sort of play, and the children wouldn't know the difference at that age, but the parents do. And it makes them question. So then you sort of go on to stereotypes, which the stereotypes go into our schemas and it all goes on in a big loop. But one of the things people always forget is that the teachers themselves have these stereotypes. Like, we all have them now. I'm trying to talk to you objectively, but at the end of the day, you have them, you're always thinking them yourself. I picked on Chris because I thought one of the girls would probably maybe guess better, because boys tend to struggle with these things more, stereotypically. So we kind of have to be balanced, because the teachers say boys are more boisterous or the girls are more chatty, and then they'll make sweeping generalisations in the classroom like, oh, boys be quiet, or girls stop talking, rather than saying sort of like, can that table over there be quiet, or they do just naturally separate them out. And then you start thinking, I was curious about this when I was working in one of the classrooms, and they'd been asked to line up boy, girl, boy, girl. I asked one of the girls why that was, and she said to separate the boys because the boys are naughty. I asked one of the boys, and she said they did it because the girls talk too much in assembly, and they always think it's the other one. It's different. It's not us. It's them, and it just separates out, and it gets ridiculous. Okay. So I want more of this, which at the moment is difficult, because people are really socially anxious of being out of their own gender roles, when we shouldn't really have gender roles as such. But the only way to get this is to have a whole school approach, and to think about gender as we are different, but when it comes to stereotypes, to actually say them, like say a stereotype, boys are boisterous, and then think about and actively sit with children and think about all the times when that's not been the case. We're really good at adding to our stereotypes, but we never counteract them. You see maybe one really awful woman driver every day. You see them backing into a lamppost and you laugh and you go, woman driver. But thousands drive past you every day and you don't go, look at those women drivers who are absolutely fine. You only ever notice the ones that add to your stereotype, which means once you've got them, they only get worse. So in conclusion, we need to we need to tackle boys' literacy, because that is what's stopping them across the whole curriculum. And we just need to foster pride and open-mindedness across everything, including, first of all, tackling the teachers themselves, so the teachers can then teach the children. And if we understand the differences and challenge the stereotypes, then the genders will be fine in a class all together. And if this went on for long enough, eventually boys might not freak out in dance classes and girls might not hide in the corner in physics. So we can only hope, hey, but ta. Any questions? Don't be mean. No? Okay, let's go.